I want you to think about someone in your life. It could be someone from right now, or it could be someone from a few years back. It could be a friend or a family member, someone you were in a relationship with, or someone you worked with. Just someone who was consistently in your corner, who actually believed in you. Someone who, when you told them about something you were trying to do, they didn't immediately have a reason to tell you why it probably wasn't going to work out. Now, think about how you felt around that person. You didn't just feel good, you felt elevated. Like the version of yourself that existed around them was bigger somehow, more confident and more willing to try things, more like who you actually were when nobody was trying to shrink you. Now think about the opposite, because I think most of us have spent way more time around the opposite than we realize. I think it's done more damage than we're willing to admit. Think about being around people who don't believe in you. It's rarely dramatic. Like, it's not someone sitting you down and telling you that you're not good enough. It's not that obvious. If it was that obvious, you'd recognize it immediately and leave. I think it's more subtler than that. It's that slight pause before they respond when you tell them something you're excited about. It's the way they always say stuff like, "That's cool, but have you thought about blank?" Well, that sounds interesting, but that's not really realistic. And I'm not saying you can do that, but or it's the way the energy in the room changes when you talk about something you want. The way the conversation moves on quickly, like what you said wasn't worth sitting with. And none of it's a big moment, and none of it's something you can just point to and say that's when it all happened. It just accumulates slowly and quietly until one day you realize you stopped sharing things with certain people. Not because you forgot to, but because somewhere along the way you just stopped expecting them to get it. And here's what I think happens when you spend too long in that environment. You start editing yourself before you open your mouth. Like you'll have an idea, something you're genuinely excited about. Before you say it out loud, your brain runs it through this filter. Like, how is this going to land? Is it going to get that look? And if the answer is probably yes, you just don't say it. And at first, it feels like self awareness, like you're just being strategic. But what it actually is you slowly learning to be smaller, learning to take up less space, learning to want things quietly instead of out loud. Because out loud is where it gets complicated. And the really insidious thing about it is it doesn't stay contained to the people who caused it. It starts leaking into everything. And you start editing yourself around people who would actually be in your corner if you let them. You start shrinking preemptively in rooms where no one's asking you to shrink. Because your nervous system has learned that wanting things out loud is dangerous. And once it learns that, it applies it everywhere, whether it's appropriate or not. So I want to tell you about this specific stretch in my life where I had this group of people I was around for a while. And I want to be fair here because none of them were bad people. Like, genuinely, none of them were malicious. They weren't trying to hold me back on purpose. And I think they just had a very specific ceiling for what they thought was possible for themselves and, by extension, everyone around them. And when you're in that environment long enough, the ceiling starts to feel like the sky. And I remember having this thing I really wanted to pursue, and I brought it up to them. And the reaction wasn't mean or anything like that. It was just flat. Like, who cares? It's like I threw the idea up into the sky and nobody caught it. I laughed it off and changed the subject and acted like it wasn't a big deal. But I didn't bring it up again, especially not to them and not to anyone for a long time. What I didn't realize at the time was I wasn't just protecting the idea from their reaction, I was starting to absorb their reaction as information. Like, maybe they're right. Maybe it's just one of those things that sounds good in my head but doesn't really hold up in the real world. Maybe I'm just being naive. And that maybe is where it gets dangerous. Because that maybe doesn't go away when you leave the room. It follows you. Here's something I genuinely believe. Your potential is not fixed. It's not a static thing you were born with that's just going to express itself regardless of circumstances. It's deeply environmental and it expands or contracts based on what's around it. I think people dramatically underestimate how much the people closest to them are shaping what they think is possible for themselves. What gets celebrated in your environment or what gets dismissed, all of that adds up, and all of it's quietly writing the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. And when you let that story be written by people who don't believe in you, people who've already decided what that ceiling is, you end up with a version of yourself that's much smaller than what you actually are. And the tragedy is you don't even know it. So how do you know this is actually what's going on? Because I think a lot of people are in it without fully recognizing it. And here's what that looks like from the inside. You have things that you want, but you never say them out loud to anyone around. And that's not because they're secret, but you already know how they're going to land. So you'd rather keep them to yourself than watch them get dismissed. You feel more like yourself around certain people than others. And the people you feel most like yourself around are probably not the ones you're spending most of your time with. Or you have a sense of what you're capable of, but it doesn't match the way people around you talk about you. And you stop bringing certain things up to certain people. Not consciously, just gradually over time, you stopped expecting conversations to go well, so you stopped having them. And if any of this sounds familiar, it's worth paying attention to. So I want to tell you what it feels like when you find people who actually believe in you. So I think there's some people watching this that have genuinely never experienced it and don't know what they're missing. It doesn't feel like hype, and it doesn't feel like people are just telling you what you want to hear. It feels like you're being seen. And what that does to you is exactly the opposite of everything I just described earlier. You stop editing before you speak, and you start saying the actual thing instead of a safer version of it. And you bring your ideas out loud instead of keeping them quiet. You start moving differently, and it's not because someone gave you a pep talk, but because someone actually listened to you. I had a person in my life who did that for me in a specific moment when I needed it, and I can't overstate how much it changed the path of what I did next. And it's not because they said anything particular, it's just because they listened, and they told me, yeah, I think you can actually do that. Look, I'm not saying cut everyone off. I'm not saying that you're going to find a new support system overnight, because it's not that simple, and I know that. But I do think it's worth taking a look at about who in your life makes you feel heard, because that voice or that reaction, it's shaping you more than you know. And you deserve to be around people who support you, you know? And that's all I'm really trying to say. I'll see you all in the next one.